Right. Today I have a very special guest with me. We met a couple, I think last week or the week before, and we just instantly gelled. And I was like, you do have to be on my podcast. Her name is Koryn Greenspan, and you are a certified pet loss bereavement specialist. Yeah. Owner of the
Yes,
Parted
got it.
Paw, and you're associate certified coach. And when we spoke last time, if you don't mind kind of introducing this so people can see, how you came into this. I know that your sister passed away from brain cancer,
Yeah.
and then you lost your dog a year later, and your dog was what we call our soul pet. And because I know, because I had my soul cat Puss, and how you didn't get exactly what you would have needed in that moment from the vets that made it really hard for you. And also afterwards, you didn't have like support. You didn't find any support to get over this incredible grief you went through with your pet. And I think, as because my listeners are all not pets, vets that are in the trenches working, and obviously we see the pet owner from our perspective, but I think having your story will be incredibly helpful to help us see what is it that pet owners most struggle with, and obviously from your experience as a coach as well, no, and how can we best help, no, so we have an experience that it's never going to be easy, isn't it, when we say goodbye to our pet, but at least so we can make it as loving and compassionate as possible so the owners can go away with some sort of resolution, or at least feel supported. You want to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was really nicely communicated, first of all. So thank you very much. It was a really bewildering experience, to be honest, and it's a huge catalyst to why I did start the company, The Parted Paw. So as you mentioned so clearly, my sister passed away of brain cancer in 2021, and it was trauma because something like that upends you entirely, and you have to relearn your entire life pretty much. And there was so much support provided for that loss, as it should be. You have everything handed to you in society. You have a grief counselor given to you. You have different groups that you can go to. You get time off work for this, so on and so forth. And it goes on and on and on. Thank goodness. Okay. Your religion has ceremony around it. I can go on. And then Georgia died, and my soul dog, as you mentioned, my soul pet. And Georgia and I worked together at my previous company for 13 years. I left PR for Georgia. Okay. Like it was she and I running that company. And she died, and it was an emergency. And in the moment, my experience, I love that you questioned and queried that, was so unreal. It almost was like really surreal as it was happening. And what I noticed primarily is that I didn't have clarity. I didn't really understand what was happening enough to have made sound decisions. So what does that look like and what actually happened? I was able to make the decision to have to euthanize her because her spleen had eroded. All of her gums were gray ash white at this point, and blood was just filling her belly. So there was no other option. So I made the decision. Everything around after that, though, I is still gray and foggy. I didn't know what was going to happen to her body. I really struggled with deciding if I should go with her or not to actually be euthanized, and there was no support given for this. My partner at the time, he wouldn't even give an opinion. And there was also what I found primarily really hard to navigate. There was a lack of just compassion from the veterinarian hospital that I was at. And that made everything so much harder to process in the moment. And I just thought, like, after that happened and after having to live that disaster, for my poor girl and for myself, because death is for the living, I decided, like, it's time to make a change in this space for every pet parent and pet moving forward. And I went back to school and got another certification and created the Parted Paw.
Again, I'm so sorry about your sister, and I'm so sorry about your dog. And on behalf of all the vets, I'm sorry that you felt, a lack of compassion. I think, and we talked about this last time, that compassion fatigue is not having too much compassion over time. It's not knowing how to handle it. It's not knowing what to do with it and feeling like we're responsible. And then it gets too much, right? And we step back and I'm just not going to show compassion. I'm just going to, compartmentalize and not kind of not be in the room. No, I'm just going to do my job. And it must be quite terrible to be on the other side of that.
It was traumatic. It really compounded the trauma. And in having worked in this space now for some time and having worked with pet parents for almost 20 years now and their pets, this is common. This is something that happens in this space. Unfortunately, this was not unique to me. And I don't think anybody's doing anything bad. And I don't think anybody is intentional. I want to really be clear about this. I don't think there's an intention to make these situations harder. And I feel for the people who end up treating people like this in the way, because it can't feel good. It's also not acceptable. We do need to have change in this area.
Yeah. Also because like you say, Georgia was your sole pet because you were working together, you were so close together. And I think when I graduated, dogs were more like farm dogs, hunting dogs, or the family dog, but they were just kind of there, and there was not this attachment we have now where so many of us, maybe out of choice or not out of choice, are single or alone. And then this pet can be everything to us now. And and then we do need to have a proper conversation, and vets need to be prepared to have very, very heavy conversations because it's going to happen. No, and what I love you said, I think last time was that, and this is maybe something else vets can help pet owners with, is in the moment, like when an emergency comes, how can you have a plan? Because obviously, if you had known up front that something could happen to Georgia like this, then you said about it, like have a plan, like be the ambassador of your pet's life and death, and because we are making life and death decisions, no, and I love that you brought that up because I feel because I work in ER as well, and owners come in and they have no plan, they have made no decisions up front, they haven't set aside money for any of the any of the plans, and it just comes like such a huge shock. And I do think maybe us vets can help when people come in with a dog, like just know that they live less than you. Something is likely going to happen, and maybe you could have a plan in place.
Yes, so correct. We are the ambassadors of our pet's life and death. And we have this very interesting paradigm and taboo notion around speaking about pet death in society. And this happens from the veterinarian world as well. And we did speak about this last time. I've done a few TikToks on this also, where what would happen if we actually brought the conversation of death into the foreground of pet ownership, and if we were armed with the ability to have a plan in advance? Like, what if when we start seeing old age happening, what if after a traumatic surgery, let's say, where something happens, the veterinarian team, staff, clinic has process and procedure in place where they say, well, now is the time where we start introducing thoughts around what you would like to do when your pet's time is arriving. Because if we can have ownership and we can have forewarning around this, we can actually create a pet loss of really deep connection, autonomy, and meaning. And not all pet loss has to be reactive, whereas 80% is reactive, and I'd say maybe 20% is out of trauma, and 80% can actually be proactive. And it furthers the question, you're the person to speak to and ask about this. Why isn't this practice in clinics? Like, nobody spoke to me about the quality of life scale for Georgia. I had to learn about that in my own education for pet loss. Why didn't my veterinarian clinic bring that up to me when she was after her ACL, when she was starting to get sick, and say, these are the things you want to look out for when you're like less than a 35, you have to start making decisions. Why aren't we doing this?
I think a big part of it is because still in our culture we have this thought that death is the loss, like we lost the battle to XYZ, and we don't really want to talk about it. I think as vets, we probably don't want to upset the owners. So if you came in for a booster or something, your dog is like 10, 11, and we can see they're getting a bit slow, it's possible that we don't want to bring it up because we don't want to upset the owners. No, we just want them to go on with their life and then deal with it as and when it becomes a problem. So I personally do talk about it with owners when they come in, and I can see, it's the time is coming, and say, well, just, it might be nice for you to have a plan. And I give them a list of things to look out for, like if they like, what are the top things they like to do? What are the top things that you that are going to tell you that this pet has no longer got quality of life? How long are you going to let it go? And especially if we diagnose a chronic disease, like for example kidney failure, right, which can be a excruciating, long, painful, kind of down sloping path. Because at what moment do you decide enough is enough? Now, and I say to owners, think about this and decide ahead of time, like how much weight are they going to lose? Like when are you going to stop? When you're like literally chewing the chicken for them and give it to, like, when is the
Right.
point where you want to stop? No. But I think a lot of vets as well, if we are really busy, we just don't have time for it, or we don't take the time for it. It gets down prioritized. We want to talk about treatment, we want to talk about diagnostics, but not necessarily maybe of end of life care.
I wonder though, is there an ethical responsibility to be introducing this as like foundational? And I say this very gingerly because what you guys do is so hard, and I really understand where compassion fatigue originates, why it happens. So I'm not like pointing a finger. These are genuine questions, shouldn't this become foundation? Like what we actually, I think we talked about this on our last call as well. There's really, unless it's assisted suicide in humans, this is really the only instance where we're actually deciding the life or death trajectory of our family, closest ally, best friend, and most trusted companion. So given that this is the foundation, like this is where we live with our pets, why isn't that equally like foundationally instituted into veterinarian practice, as a baseline? And why like why like and you just gave the answer, but isn't it time for change is more of the question.
I think so. And I think you say something really important. I think it could be a good idea if veterinary clinics have, like, from age 8, for example, in bigger breeds, which is what you say now, a geriatric, we could give people a leaflet and say, hey, just notice that your dog has now reached this age, and these are the things you want to look out for. These are the things that could happen, diabetes, kidney failure, whatever stuff that could happen. And this is what would happen in an emergency. What decisions are you going to want to take? I do feel that maybe you can speak with this with some owners,
Yeah.
but some owners deny reality. I mean, I have had owners
Yeah.
where it's been a 9-year-old lab and he's had tumors in the abdomen, tumors in the chest, bleeding into the chest, and the guy turns around and says, "And what do we do next?" And I'm like, at a loss for words,
Yeah.
because dude, like, if you're grown up man, you got kids, reality of life. Surely you can see that there's this is a no return, right? And some people don't want to accept that, and then you talking about death, suddenly you are the bad in the room. It's like you
Yeah.
are like calling the death in, right?
That's a really good point. And this is where again, like your role, the veterinarian's role, becomes complicated in and of
Yeah.
itself, right? Because it's like you have to deal with the medical back end and the front end facing with client. And having worked with, again, like pets for soul and humans in a non-veterinarian scope, right? Like in a different way, I understand to the degree that I was working with them in that way, how sensitive that space is. And it's like the language has to be so gently crafted because that relationship between pet and owner is so essential and pivotal. So it is, it is almost impossible. It is a question of compassion though. So it's like, you have such a compassionate tone. You can hear it. You can see it in your work, right? You can see in what the videos and your writings that you produce. And it's like because there's some clinics, for example, where, and I've heard this and I've experienced it, their sweet spot is compassion. And there's others where I've heard clients say, like, I had a terrible experience there. I had one, and terrible experience. So like maybe that clinic's aptitude is not for compassion, and maybe that's where they hire someone to be their compassionate liaison, right? Where it's like, we can't deal with this. We're really good at X, Y is not our wheelhouse, but we're going to institute a buffer for our clients because we understand how important this is too. I don't know, is that something you think would be viable or realistic?
It could be. I find so the people I coach, I find they lack often will lack compassion because when they speak to me about pet owners, they speak about them because the vets, just to clarify, because obviously I'm a burned out coach for all the vets. The people that come to me are burned out. They are in basically fight and flight. They feel resentment towards the owners.
Yes.
They talk about the owners as in they want from me, they're taken from me. They always come with the same stories. I'm bored if it's always the same. They don't talk about compassion because they don't even start with compassion for themselves, right? They're not taking themselves out of a situation that is obviously burning them out alive. So to expect them to have compassion for someone else, I can see how this is very hard. No, I can see where it's coming from. And this changes once they kind of calm themselves down and they can ground themselves, then you have space to have compassion for others. I think the clinics maybe where if there's general clinics where oh they're not compassionate, I think it's maybe a clinic problem. I don't think that I'm not sure how much a compassion leads would help because I think there's a foundational problem of there's a
Mm.
root problem of what we call toxic environment where maybe everybody are getting overworked and there's kind of like you know how the system just comes in place where everybody are just resentful towards each other and just want to get home as quick as possible, no, and every owner is
Yes.
just another box they have to tick, no, before they can finally leave for the day.
I think that's so interesting what you're communicating because as the patient, and again, I've worked with thousands of patients now in the right. So
Mm,
I've worked with the pet parents, right?
yeah,
What there's a harshness of what you're communicating in this type of environment. And let me know what you think about this is with, this resentment comes judgment.
yeah,
And I've personally felt that like
yeah.
from this one or two clinics in particular, I'm with a great vet now. They're amazing. Okay. So we went and another place that worked for like our soul. Okay. But like there was just such a profound judgment that was like, it's like when you're, oil, like when you get a smear of oil on you, you can't get it off, like grease, like it doesn't wash off. It kind of
Mm.
stains you in that way. And I wonder if there's like that resentment and judgment kind of go hand in hand like that, where it is like this disdain for the client. And it's like, are you in the right field? Is this like, so it is, I guess, a systemic issue within the clinic then, is what I'm hearing you suggest around this.
And it's a systemic issue in the profession, right? Because there's a lack of vets. And then the older vets are now telling people going into the field, oh, don't go into the field because you're going to get burned out. And now we have the whole thing about the big corporations that are running the clinics in a certain way, and people are then leaving the field, and we don't have enough vets, which means that the few they are getting are getting burned out because they
Yeah.
have to overwork. And because of what I always talk about, our perfectionism, imposter syndrome, complete lack of boundaries, and people pleasing, we just work too much and put ourselves in a position where we just don't have room for compassion. And we end up, when you don't have compassion, and because we, of course, behind the scenes, I joke with my nurses, when an owner comes in and just say the most silly things, and we know they do it, or over the phone, right? And they do it because they are freaked out. They're freaking out and they just say stupid things. And we talk between us. Oh my God, when it's my own pet, I do the same, and
Yeah.
we know between us, but it's not with that judgment. It's funny. We had one in that called in and said, "Oh, my dog is breathing like a pigeon." And we're like, "What does that mean?" It just didn't make any sense. And then
Yeah.
afterwards we laugh about it. But in the situation we don't, and we would never show, judgment towards that client. It's just something that helps us kind of get some pressure off and laugh about it. But it's not, but we don't really feel that judgment towards the client, if that makes sense. But when
I
you really burned out, and then you can't laugh about it. You can't, you just like, why are you making my work harder? Can you not just understand what I'm saying? Can you not just quickly make this decision? Because I need to get on to the next one. No?
Yeah, I'm what you're seeing in my change of body there is experiencing that. It's
Yeah.
like laughter. I don't what I'm hearing in you saying that is it's not a laughing at. It's a levity of the moment.
Yeah.
And that's a much stronger place to be operating from in this, like when that person's calling about the pigeon. Like I called the vet because like Lenny, like his ear was crooked one day. Okay. Like, and I freaked out. They were so kind about it. Right. They're like,
Yeah.
like, here's your options. Like, and they were like, they sat me down and we had like really serious talk about the fakakta options. It took 2 minutes. it took 2 minutes out of their day. Okay, this particular clinic, so they have, I think, 6 reception, and that is their job, is to be the front line for the people who call with the pigeon breath and the crooked ear for like a second. Okay, and then when you go into the back there, there's like 12 techs who like manage the ailments of the dogs, right? And the cats and the pets, you know, and then you go and so there's so many like layers put into place of function and compassion and kindness at this clinic. And if we're not getting that, it can like really change your internal self, and it can really hinder you from like the next time there is a real situation, maybe you don't call because you had a really
Mm.
bad experience and then something really bad happens. Like, isn't that the job to show up for the pigeon calls and the crooked ear calls? I don't like, I think it's part of it.
It is part of it, but and we do that, and then we can say, oh my, and I will have a lot of patience because I think being a coach as well really helps me now because I can kind of see what they're thinking, whatever they're telling me, I can kind of follow their brain because that's what we do as coaches, right? We know what their story
Yeah.
is. And I will have really a lot of patience. And sometimes the nurses will say, like, you were so patient with that person. I'm like, well, it's just easier, isn't it? It's easier to be patient. And they end up hanging up saying, oh, thank you so much for the advice. Even if I didn't really end up giving them advice, I just kind of listened and said, yeah, you could do this, you could do that. No? So it is easier to be like that for sure. But again, when you're in burnout, you're not reacting from that space. No, you're reacting from, you're not even breathing. Everything is just like against me.
What's the solution then? Like, because this practice around burnout and compassion fatigue, I mean, it's also, let's don't even like welfare, right? Like animal shelter. Like the compassion fatigue there is on such a different level as well. And it also is
God.
like like I've volunteered all over, I've worked with different places. If that's such an ethical compassion fatigue, right? And you have different, I had to leave one place because I was like, this is not healthy for me ethically. I disagree. It's like da 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 da.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we move forward? Like, where is the solution for it? Like, what is it? Do you have thoughts around that? I mean, I know I do. Do you have thoughts around it?
Yeah, I do, of course, and that's why I always teach my vets is trying not to feel so responsible for the situation. No, it's like you just give your good,
Love that.
just tell them exactly what you think. Be honest, ask questions, be curious, and don't put all the weight on you. Because the one thing that burned me out was me being responsible for the feelings of the owner, no, and having. And then you don't want to tell them your dog is dying because then now they're sad and now it's my fault, right? But that's not how it is. That's a process they're gonna go through regardless of what you say or don't say. So you might as well help them go through it. No,
Mhm.
um, what I'm interested in as well is your thoughts. Like, what are the experiences your pet owners come with that that something that repeats itself, or where the vet said or did something that caused trauma in the pet owners and made it really difficult for them to move on with their lives. Like I said, I had an owner coming in saying, I cannot go in that consult room with you because my dog was put down in that room 2 years ago. To me, that must be PTSD, right? So what
That
are
is the,
yeah, and I don't know exactly what happened, but what are the situations that you see with your owners that where the vets have said or done something that has not been supportive at all? Where's somewhere where we need to think twice about what we do?
I've had I'd say 3 or 4 different examples of people having such a bad reaction from a moment of like their own crisis in terms of treatment that they don't actually like, it confuses their internal system of what to do next when something actually happens. And this has happened in different ways. Like this one client I had, her dog, the dog ended up dying that night and they had to take it in for an emergency. And she had such a bad situation occur at the vet's office 3 weeks before that she was quiet about what was happening along the way. And because that happened, we can't point fingers. We can't say that's why. The dog ended up dying that night because it was an emergency and they had to go. Now
Mm,
she had to leave it there because it needed breathing, like I'm gonna cry, ventilation, and then by the morning it had died.
yeah.
And like, because that one situation traumatized her so much because of the root, like the resentment, the judgment, all the things we're talking about here, this very real kind of harshness that occurred, she felt dumb for
Could
calling
could
it a problem.
could you walk me through, obviously again without naming and identifying anybody, but could you walk me a bit through what her experience was? Because I'm trying to see from our point of view, like how can vets maybe recognize when they're doing this and just stopping themselves, so when they can see they're going
Yeah.
into a situation like this, what did she experience?
It was like breathing. It was a breathing issue with the dog. He was short snouted breed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't breathe. Like he was like extremely congested. So they went to the vet. It was something minor at that time. And it needed some like oxygen to clear everything. But they were fine and they went home. And they said, next time just leave it for a little bit longer. Like maybe it can heal itself. Okay. Like this wasn't such an urgent situation. And the vet who had talked to her gave her no, like, she was very upset. She was like, and when something happens with our pets, we instantly think it's the end almost every single time. Okay. Like this is what happens. It's like, oh my God, it's over. They were so aggressive with her about that. They were like, that was ridiculous. You had no need to react this way. Like that was too much. He just needed this. Like, leave it a little bit next time. Make sure you're calling for like a real valid reason, something that, And so then it happened a few more times and the dog was able to settle, but it prolonged itself. Like it kept going. It didn't clear up. It was a senior dog. And so then like it was so bad he could not breathe. They had to rush him to the hospital, needed to be left there in the thing. Pardon my lack of veterinarian terms here. And then he died by morning. And then
Oh,
and he died.
yeah.
Okay. And she like is so dejected about through guilt of her own self, which had that original situation that happened, this could have played out so differently.
Hmm.
And it's like that type of a talking to is not acceptable. I've had a talking to like that before. Okay. I've had it happen to me. Lenny had a seizure and he had to go to the hospital. And I was so upset. And and the vet tech, I was like, is he going to die? Is he going to die? Like, is he going to die? And she's like, well, I can't. And she was like cold about it. She was like, well, I can't tell you. Maybe. That's literally what she said to me. And I freaked out. And then the doctor comes in and she said, no, he's fine. Don't worry about it. He's totally cool. And had she had a modicum of compassion, I would maybe step back into that clinic. I will not anymore. So then I went to my
Hmm.
doctor and I followed up with Lenny, my vet, and he showed me the note, which he shouldn't have done. He said, I shouldn't be showing you this. Okay. But they said they wrote this, they tore me apart. Owner was really anxious. We couldn't get her. I was like, well, the reason why I was anxious is because this person just told me that my dog might die and that she couldn't help me at all. So that's not an okay situation. And it's not okay for that woman either to have gone through that at that other experience. I really disagree with that profoundly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's because I don't consider myself the best vet clinically. I am for sure not. I don't sit and read books all night or go to every
Right.
webinar, you know. But I think sometimes for the owners, just feeling heard and feeling held, and be there for them, and maybe I say if they had gone with someone who was more brilliant than me, that knew this exactly weird condition or whatever, this new treatment, the dog would have lived, say, a month longer. But I think them having a good experience or whatever goodbye they have to say to the animal or whatever is happening, if they can feel supported and held and feel autonomy and feel supported and feel like everything is done with calm and with love as much as possible, especially being in an emergency situation. A lot of time I have to say to them, I say, I'm so sorry, you are going to have to make a decision because your pet is suffering, and I'll say it like I'm so sorry, like with tears in my eyes. And the owners understand. They understand and they feel like we're in this together. And I think sometimes that's more important than whatever clinical help you can give them. No, and I will sometimes say, I've never seen this before. I don't know why this is happening, but I can tell you it's probably bad. And I will like be super honest. No, and I do feel sometimes vets think, because we have this imposter syndrome and this perfectionism, they think, oh my God, if I was just better or whatever, then I could probably help this pet, but I can't. And then they get defensive. They don't want you to find out how bad they are, quote unquote, which they're not. It's in their head, but they feel kind of attacked because you brought them something they might not feel they can handle. And I'm going to say, I've been doing this for 20 years, and every week of my shift, I will see something I've never seen before. So we're never going to get it perfect. We're never going to know exactly what to do every time clinically because it's just not possible. But you can know what to do humanly, if you know what I mean. You can know what to do communication wise. You can know how to show and be there for the owners for sure.
That's such a beautiful perspective. I'm so glad that you've communicated that, because that actually that puts some rhyme to the reason there, right? I've never thought about that before. For sure. Maybe they're just, and when people feel like they can't, they do tend to shut down. So that makes me have compassion for the entire situation, actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you said that. And it's like,
Yeah. I'll let you compose and I'll say a bit more that vets, and I've just wrote a post about this, that vets are being attacked a lot. Like
yeah,
I said in a comment, like there's some Facebook page in Norway that has 25,000 members, and the title is literally like these shitty expensive vets or something along those lines. And I went in to see like what are they actually saying, and I had to leave quicker than Simpson can hide in a hedge because that was horrible. The
yeah,
way they were slagging off the vets. So you have to understand as well that we become defensive really quickly and we write notes about how owners are behaving because it could come and bite us in the ass later, which is very sad, but that's how it is. So the few owners that behave like this and will attack us, they actually make it very
scary.
difficult for normal, nice owners, quote unquote.
That's so interesting, and I think again, like this is, so first of all, in this moment of emotion, in this part of the conversation we had, I think that it's also so upsetting. I want to go back to what you just said. I wrote it down. I think it's also so upsetting for the patients is because we go to the vets like, you're our parents in this scenario. Like, we're like, fix it, right? Because we can't. So we're like, fix it, right? So it's like, in that moment, if we're seeking like that type of like, not kid gloves, but like, I love like that truthful compassion is really a sweet spot, right? And like, that is a fix it. A fix it isn't being like really cold or judgmental or have resentment. That's not you're our parent in that moment, right? You're our God in
Mm,
that moment. You're our leader. And
yeah.
by acting other than truthfully compassionate, which is a really great mantra for how to manage compassion fatigue, actually, um it's like it's a very deep wound that gets developed there, and I
Mm,
understand like there is a defensiveness that is showing, and online it can be a very miserable place to be. So that's just horrible, and we've all had moments around that. And so we have like different words that are now, hello, I'm going to get my coaching hat on. So we have different words that are like propping up here. So we have resentment, judgment, defensiveness. Right. So like maybe, so in Judaism, there's a shoresh, which means the root. So maybe this is kind of the shoresh of where compassion fatigue lies. And like maybe from a greater perspective, we have a way here to kind of wedge in and create a link towards, truthful compassion to like end
You talked
this.
about this last time. And you said something, and I didn't get it right, wrote down because I was so like, what is she saying? You talked about what
I'm
real
glad.
yeah, because you talked about real compassion, and we said like compassion is not this and this. And I think as a grief coach, you probably have a beautiful way of describing compassion. What is it? Compassion really is, and how does it manifest, and how do we know if we are in real compassion or we are some sort of like non-aligned compassion, which is the one that ends up giving us compassion fatigue. You said it so much more beautiful and made
Thank you.
sense when you said it.
Thank you. I have to, like, my thoughts are like, meh, but I would have to say that like compassion really is holding space.
Hmm.
And it's authentically being present for the person who is going through emotional trauma. And authenticity, while bearing witness to emotional trauma, is compassion. You don't have to say what you think. It doesn't matter. And I'm not talking about a medical point of view. I'm talking about the emotional ability to hold space for somebody's emotional trauma. Okay? So we can communicate medical essential treatment, hold space for somebody's emotional trauma, be transparent, and show up kindly for what actually needs to happen in the moment. And that is compassion.
Can you tell me a bit more about what is holding space in this sense? So if you come in with your dog and it's sick and you want a vet to have compassion for you and you want to be held space for as a coach, because I know you can probably see, if I know ask like a non-coach person, they'll be like, I don't know. But what is that exactly? Just so the vets can understand what is holding space. Because like my assumption when I was a new grad was compassion is I have to take everything on. It's my fault if they feel bad and I need to fix it and I need to make sure everybody are happy at the end of this, which was a huge burden and for sure not what compassion was. But what does
Wow.
it actually look like then, holding space for someone's emotional trauma?
So as a coach, so I do bereavement counseling and I am a coach. So I
Mm,
get to like blur lines a bit. However,
yeah.
as a coach, our actual job, I think maybe this is what you were referring to a second ago, is to derive zero opinion on what your coachee is speaking about. It is our job to sit with them where they are at. It is not the minute my point of view, my personal point of view comes into the session, I've lost. The session's over. Ethically, that's a coaching X. Okay.
Hmm.
If you want to go by the code of ethics for like the International Coaching Federation, and I think holding space for compassion has the same point of view, right? It's not to bear witness to somebody else's emotions and emotional trauma has nothing to do with you. And you can sit with them authentically and hear them. And you can say, I hear you. That's a very strong statement. You have already diffused the situation. You
Mm,
have already talked your client off of the top of the curtain. Okay. So now they're like a quarter down. Okay. And then another great thing to do, if we're a quarter down now, tell me the entire situation. Tell me again. Tell me. I'm here to listen. Tell me.
mm,
We're halfway down the curtain because they're breathing now.
mm.
Okay. Another thing that's going to bring them down the curtain. I understand this is so hard. We're almost at ground. Let me know when you're ready for us to speak medically.
Mm.
We've landed. Okay. And it maybe will take 4 minutes. Maybe it'll take 8 minutes. You've now arrived in compassion outside of personal judgment professionally and authentically, truthfully compassionate to bear witness to your client's pain.
Right. So
The
it's important
conversation can begin.
as a vet to step back. So say that the animal has been hospitalized. Say you have a seizure dog, like a dog has a seizure,
Honey?
comes in
Yep.
and I cannot stop the seizures. I put them on, on a drip.
Yep.
I try to stop the seizures and we cannot, this dog is not going to do. Maybe we do a scan, it's got a tumor. It's like, so the importance here is me not getting into my own head about being a failure, about not saving this dog. Let's say it potentially could have been saved. I don't know. Something went wrong or it just can't be saved, full stop.
Mhm.
And I have this feeling of I failed as a vet because I quote unquote should have saved the dog. And it's very
Hmm.
important then for me to step back and not feel guilty about it, because that's then when I can't hold that space, right? Because now I'm trying to make you feel better so I don't have to feel so guilty, right?
That's right. And we know, like, we're in crisis. We know anything can happen. Receiving judgment, resentment, right? All of these words that we're now understanding is the foundation of where compassion fatigue comes from and where this is derived from. Receiving all that's just going to put us right back at the curtain. We're at the top
Mm.
now. So you've just created so much more work because none of that is actually about you. You're like the container. You're the container, right? Of where all of this has to go. We don't need, we feel, I can use myself in that moment. And let's say a vet came to me with Lenny's seizure, for example. We can use this as our canon example. And they spoke to me in a way that authentically and truthfully was compassionate and held space for my trauma. I would just be like, you are the best person in the world. You are so
Mm.
kind. I can't believe you did that. It is, I understand that anything could have happened here. This was a crisis, whether the outcome be good, bad, or indifferent. God forbid it's bad. That person now, that vet, that human, just first of all, exposed their humanity in a very charged space. They're a hero in my eyes because they were kind to me. Okay. And they were truthful because they delivered kindly the medical advice I needed to hear from my dog. What more can anybody ask for?
Mm. What then if you didn't have the money? I think that's a big one for us, right?
Yeah.
Because if say your dog has seizures, it got some condition, and it could be fixed, but it's going to cost you $12,000, and you do not have
Yeah.
that money, your dog is not insured. So I think for us that is incredibly hard because I could fix your dog. I know what to do. I got the tools, but you're not gonna quote unquote let me because you don't have the money. And I think a lot of us there, so I don't because I have been poor. I was
Yeah.
really poor when I was a kid. And so I have compassion for that. But a lot of us, I think, get a bit like, well, why didn't you get insured? Why didn't you save up? Now you're putting me as a vet in a difficult situation where I have to watch your dog die because you have not gotten money for it. That is not helpful as an owner to hear that, right? So how can we best support the owner when something is going to end in euthanasia because they don't have the money? What's the best way to support them so they don't get trauma and guilt for the rest of their lives about not having this money? And often it's not their fault. Like they literally just lost their job or got divorced or something else happened. The car broke. I don't know. It's nobody's fault, is it? But how can we best support them, do you think?
Companionship. Again, like it's like these are, it's like there's like a litmus of like trajectory of how to have compassion, right? You kind of want
Mm.
to go through the same trajectory with them. I hear you. Let's talk about all options, right? Give them the chance. Just give them the chance to get there, to alleviate their internal sadness. I really believe that's what people need. They need that. And if you give them the
Mm.
chance, you can sit with them. And this has to happen, right? And again, by giving them the chance, you make it less and less about you. Because none of it is about you, really. Like it's not about your internal network at all. It's about theirs. You're doing your job, but you're not doing your job if you sit in judgment and resentment and create toxicity. That is not your job. So again, so it's like even in these horrible, situations of when there is a financial issue, it's the same litmus. You
It's
know,
remembering it's not about me. And I think from what I can see is the vets that are really reactive, the vets I see struggle out when I see them out there, are the ones that have little confidence. And it doesn't, some of them are brilliant vets. They're like, you know much more than me.
yeah.
I do not know how you're not, but they don't see it. And then the ego comes in because now I have to prove something. I have to prove I'm good enough all the time. And they're stressed out. And then they make it about them. It's a bit like, um, when you have to be a public speaker and you have to stand up in front of an audience and talk. And when you make it about you, it is so stressful. But if you just remember, no, I'm just here to deliver this message. They want to hear this from me. They want to hear whatever I have to say because I want to help them. No, but if you make it about you, it's really stressful because you think all the eyes are looking at you and judging you, which is not the case. And I think a lot of us forget that the owners are not looking at me, judging me about what I know and I don't know. They're looking at me because they're waiting for me to say something that could potentially be helpful.
Yeah, that's, you know what's helpful? Truth.
Mm,
Like, that's helpful. That is what's helpful. Truth
mm,
delivered kindly.
mm,
Right. And it's like this space that we're in, this vet client vet, is very hard. And it's like, by the way, just because somebody has compassion fatigue or a poor bedside manner, I love that you just said what you said, doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean they're probably one of the best vet techs or veterinarians that could ever exist. They may know exactly like a million more things that another person may. Again, it doesn't make them, it has nothing to do with them. It's not, maybe it's just not their area of expertise. And like,
mm.
by the way, that's okay. But by putting them face forward to the client, first of all, we're creating a failure. We're not setting up that person for success. Or we're not setting up that client patient dynamic for success, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if we know that a person is foundationally this way, don't put them with the client. Have somebody else communicate the essential information, or if they have to do it because they're so good, which might be very well, might true, have your compassion person there as well,
Mm,
right? Like, let's create spaces of success here from the
yeah.
onset. Okay, let's create language in our clinics that everybody speaks towards. Okay, um, let's have communication set in place at 8 years old. This is how we operate in our clinic. We have a holistic approach to pet life and pet death. Here's how we handle these things. Here's your
Mm.
quality of life scale. Whereas I have chills thinking about this because it almost perpetuates such an adverse shocked reaction if we're not doing this stuff, that we're creating a toxic start around death, around
Mm.
pain, around communication. And it doesn't have to be that way.
That is so true. And I think we talked about last time as well, like it used to be normal to talk about death, and tribes have got like it's just, well, death is just normal, and this is what you do when somebody dies, and this is what you do when the moment comes. But even within humans, we just don't accept it. No, like we want to live forever. We're taking all these supplements. Billionaires are like spending all their money on health
Yeah.
to try and live forever, and death is gonna come to all of us. And having conversation around it, and like you say, literally be prepared for it in the clinic. We have in our clinic, we have a folder that's a bit it's actually a crematorium has created it for like when you have to make this decision in the end. So I never give it out because I only do emergency. So it's literally like when they come to me, it's way too late. No, but it would be an idea if each clinic could make that, and that's probably a job for the nurses, who are the ones that you call them back techs, that are the ones speaking most to the owners. Even maybe receptionists as well could like, how is a way to formulate this so people know, what to look for. I think she's got the pet senior vet or something along those lines on Instagram, and she made a video where she showed like where you have a calendar
Mhm.
and you say, so what are the 5 things that my dog or cat loves to do? So eat, play, whatever. And every day they do all of those 5 things, you give it a green tick on the calendar. Every day they don't, you do a red cross. And at the end of the month, you look at the month at the month and you say, okay, how many green ticks did I have and how many red crosses? And when you get more red crosses than green ticks, it's kind of like a really good way of being objective about it, being neutral and say, no, my pet has not got quality of life now. How many ticks am I gonna let go before, and have the conversations like this and advise people up front. I think each clinic, like you say, could have their own language or everybody on the same hymn sheet and can kind of communicate this. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, so what you're describing is the seventh that's the second M of the set of the litmus of the quality of life scale. It's 5 H's, 2 M's, more good days than bad days. That is
Mm.
part of it. You are 100, you got it. Like, yes. And like, so just even, I just did a post on LinkedIn the other day about, all over the world, we have ceremony for loss. Like there's specific days that are, and what's interesting is that in these ceremonies and these rituals, there's no difference considered between human loss and pet loss, because
Mm.
there's this understanding that loss is loss. And I personally love that idea and then that notion, 'cause the distinction makes it hard for people. That's another conversation. Sorry. So the point is like, if we are able to have such profound ritual and ceremony and tradition in so many places in the world, yet we're really struggling in this part of the world around even accepting and acknowledging that this is going to happen, we have a lot of work to do in this space to catch up on. Like there is a
Mm.
lot, there's a lot of
Yeah.
gaps that need to be filled here. In
Yeah.
my opinion, I don't know. I really do see it that way.
No, I do totally. I think first of all, people need to get themselves calm and grounded and be able to actually give, because if you can't, then it's you're just gonna fail no matter what, right? And
Yeah.
then second, also learn about communication, learn how to listen, active listening, and not wanting to fix the owners and not go like, oh well, he was old anyway, or something like that, which is not very fortunate. You don't say these things to quote unquote make them feel better, because it's not helping.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I think there's a lot of tools out there. Have you got any what are have you got any materials, any books, anything where vets maybe can have a look and
I'm
see for
creating.
themselves? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm working with a couple clinics right now. People are starting to reach out and ask me to put together work for their clinics. So
Mm,
I'm actually creating a compassion fatigue workbook right now. I will definitely
nice.
send it your way when it is complete, because I do think that I love this conversation. And the reason why is it's like so good for the workbook, because it puts the other end of it, right? And it gives a lot of the why. And it's something that I can now have compassion towards, and I can have a different insight and understanding towards it. Because if you're going to combat like defensiveness, resentment, and judgment with defensiveness, resentment, and judgment, because this is what happens, right? Then we're going like this. We're never going to get anywhere. But like after this illuminating, wonderful conversation, I have more things to add to this workbook. So yes, I am putting something together to answer your question. Sorry. And when I do, it will be sent your way.
Perfect. I think like exactly what you're saying is like it's bridging the gap, isn't it? It's like conversations like these can help bridging the gap between pet owners and vets so we can kind of understand each other better. I think, like I said, when I studied 20 years ago, society has grown so quickly. So
Yeah.
we have maybe not learned to see it the way it is right now, which is how much pets actually mean for the pet owners and how we actually need to be educated. And the vet schools should bloody well do that, shouldn't they? They shouldn't just have like 1 hour of whatever that you can Uber comes in and gives a free pizza. It should be. Well, we need to learn a lot about this. Remember, I told you, and I put a reel up about this about me having a euthanasia, and this couple son died of leukemia 4 years ago. I mean, do I have the tools for this? Yes, because I'm a coach and I've been through loss myself. But any like younger than me that doesn't have
No, they don't
they don't.
know.
Like, how do you handle that? Um, it's really hard. I put a rabbit to death to sleep the other day, and just like 2 nights ago, and as I put her to sleep, and she was 7 years old, I'm like, okay, well, me thinking, oh, it's just a rabbit, quote unquote, because I haven't had rabbits myself, and the owner was like, oh, I can't see it. Can the husband he can stand and I can stand behind, and I think, oh, she's really attached to this rabbit. Okay, fine, um, and uh, and as she's leaving, she's like, oh, it's just that because our daughter was really sick, and here comes the story, right? So the daughter had been really sick, in and out of hospital. They gotten this rabbit, and the rabbit had been the emotional support animal for this daughter. I don't know if she lived or died. I didn't get the whole story because they were too upset. But I was like, of course, there's always something behind it, isn't there? When they seem to quote unquote overreact, there's something behind, and they don't always share this because why should they? And we need
That
to have tools for this.
you're so right, because why should they? And this is where taking that 4 minutes to get them off the curtain, I don't think that was needed in that moment, let's say, but in other moments, right? Taking that 4 minutes if they're up here to bring them to the ground is everything.
Mm,
It is everything to that person. It is everything to you as well as the professional in that space. And it's everything to the outcome of how people are going to feel. Also, like about your clinic moving forward. We are in business, right? You know, the end of a life is also the beginning of a new life at some point. I'm sorry to have to say it, but this is the
yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
right? So it's like business forward thinking. Like, why not? Like, I'm a businesswoman, right? So it's like, why not like create a warm cushion for them so that you can continue this connection into their next place of life with their next pet too. Like, there's so many reasons, you know, and like everybody who has a pet, there's pet communities. So then it's like now you've just permeated this awful experience into that entire person's community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So the reasons for having this conversation, which I'm so thankful, you know, like thank you so much.
Thank you.
Exploring this and like having this topic out in the open and in the ether of life and the internet. I'm really grateful.
No, I'm grateful to you for you to come and talk about this because I think, like I say, I think this is the only way we can bridge the gap and learn how important it is, and hopefully also push the vet schools to include more of these conversations and not just at the end 2 minutes before you're gonna you know, go out in real life and realize this is something you're going to have to deal with. Yeah, I know you just want to go out there and show how good you are at surgery or internal medicine, but you're actually going to have these really tough conversations and you need to be prepared for them. It doesn't happen magically. Some people do have the skill, right? They just born like that. They just have, I don't know, haven't had an emotionally stable childhood. I don't know. Some people just seem to be
Right?
good at this.
It works for
But
them. Like the stars
yeah,
align. Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
you, but most of us have our own trauma and our own like issues to deal with, and we need to be able to, like you say, hold the space for them because it is a win-win. It's a win for me going home that I can feel like, okay, I saved no animal tonight, but all the owners were grounded and quote unquote happy with the service. And I will have what was it I had a client say as well. He left and he said, thank you. You made me feel so comfortable, after I put his
Yeah.
17-year-old cat down. And, that's fine. I couldn't save the cat, 17-year-old, but that is enough. No, like he can go home and we made him feel comfortable. So I feel good. The client feels good. And like you said, the future, if he gets another kitten, he'll bring it to us. So for the business, it's good as well. It's good for all the way around. Yeah.
It's a win-win. And in what you just said, I'd just like to highlight the pet passed and it was still a win-win. Like, let's think
Exactly.
about what you just said. And that's because compassionately, you did everything right.
Yeah.
That's really big.
Yeah. And this opens up for a whole new discussion about just before we can, should we, drag that poor cat's life out for like 5 days, away from the owner,
Right?
and then it crashes in the end. So sometimes like having the numbers right, on the blood test and on everything is maybe not the important thing. Maybe it is give this animal and the owner some dignity and time together and maybe have it live 5 days less, and that does not make you a worse vet. All the contrary. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And these important conversations are pivotal around etching change, and the educational foundation around it, I think, is brilliant for you to say. And it's a good place to go to next, I think, also, and
Yeah.
keep the conversation going and see how we can keep momentum around this. It's essential.
Yeah. We said this last time. We could need to do a workshop together.
I know, I would love it. Honestly, I'm in. Like, let's book
We'll do
and
it. Yeah.
like book some time. I'm ready.
Yeah, and then bridging the gap. Thank you
Right?
so much for coming on. I'll link to your handles and that on the show notes so people can follow you as well and learn more, because I think whatever you post and say about pet owners' experience vets can learn from it and help, bridge that gap.
No, it's good to know. I'm gonna follow up with an article on LinkedIn for sure, and I'm looking forward to continuing to know you and
Yeah,
see
same.
where we can work together and how it goes moving forward.
Love it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Corinne. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.